an event in London, Ontario. I loaded up the car with books and made the trip, knowing that I probably wouldn't make expenses, but I had hopes of reaching new readers who might support me down the road. What I didn't expect was to come away from Canada with a whole new outlook on my future as a writer. One of the people in attendance that weekend was Linda Hill, publisher of Bella Books. From where I was sitting, Bella was the gold standard, thought of by many as the old Naiad, the books that epitomized our lives in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Best of all, Bella had a distribution network that effectively targeted lesbians coast to coast and around the world. But publishing with Bella came with a caveat, or so I believed. I'd heard the grumblings about their company: no unsolicited manuscripts, nothing over 60,000 words, first love scene by chapter 3. And in fact, I'm not making this up, I heard it said that Bella authors basically turned in their manuscript, signed over the rights, and never saw it again until Bella's editors had doctored it to fit their formula. I wish. For a control freak like me, all of that was a deal breaker. So imagine my surprise and suspicion when Linda fielded questions from the audience, saying that Bella welcomed submissions from new writers in a variety of genres and with no upper word limit. She went on to proudly describe the editorial process at Bella as collaborative, where authors had the final word. What Bella wanted, she said, was to build long-term relationships with authors where everyone was happy, especially the thousands of lesbians in their reader audience. It sounded too good to be true, but I wanted to believe it, and I made up my mind that day that I wanted Bella to publish my books. Unfortunately, that sort of thing isn't a unilateral decision. I needed to convince Bella that they wanted my name on their label. Some stalking was involved. In fact, it took place at the very first GCLS con in New Orleans in 2005, when I thrust all 4 of my self-published books into Linda's hands. I'm in the Royal Academy of Bards Hall of Fame, I said. To which she replied, "What the hell is that?" I decided not to mention the Swollen Butt Award. But Linda indulged me, and after a couple of anxious months, while she and others at Bella looked over my work, we struck a deal. That isn't quite the end of the story. Thanks to my redacted publishing experience and the problems I had with self-publishing, my trust level was pretty low. I continued to obsess over details about things like the cover art, the blurb, the listings on all the distribution outlets, how quickly the books were moving, and if they would be ready on time. All those things that I had meant to give up when I signed with a publisher. I don't want to know how close I came to being kicked to the curb by Bella for trying to micromanage all staff jobs during those first couple of years. I'm grateful they held on to me while I learned to let them do their jobs so that I could put that energy into doing my job better. That's the trail I've walked to get this far. I know a lot of you are in the same place as I am today. You're settled in a situation that suits you. You let the pros handle the details so your creative side can flourish. Others are still getting the lay of the land, studying their options, and trying to get all moving parts to work together. But what about our trail forward, the one we have to forge now for those who follow? When the historians examine this generation of lesbian literature, they'll surely note 3 profound movements that help define the age. First, they'll describe the rise of our community. Thanks to the internet, we sit here today representing several corners of the world, all in celebration of lesbian work. We gather too in places like New Orleans, Provincetown, and York, at readings and promotional events in local communities, and on a host of social networks, blogs, and lists. I've already shared my feelings about the value of this community for those of us who sought to belong. It's a wonderful legacy for our generation, and I think we all should be very proud of our role in creating and sustaining it. Second, the historians will applaud the increased accessibility of our books. Not only did the internet make ordering more convenient, it made it safe for those who feared consequences for public purchasing books with lesbian themes. Our books also became instantaneous, meaning readers were only one click away from downloading and falling into a story. And third, they'll document the explosion in titles and the diversity that results when hundreds of authors add their unique voices to the literary landscape. Today we have books about cops, nurses, CEOs, artists, bartenders, rock stars, ranchers, pirates, vampires, and extraterrestrials. Something for every single mood and whimsy. But which particular books will the historians say defined our generation? Last spring, Bella held an event called the Y Tour in Fort Lauderdale that included a reading at the Stonewall Library and Archive. Catherine Forrest kicked it off by reading this passage from the foreword she had written for Lesbian Pulp Fiction, an anthology of books from the 1950s. She said, "The writers of these books laid bare an intimate, hidden part of themselves, and they did it under siege. Because there was a desperate urgency inside them to reach out, to put words on the page for women like themselves to read. Their words reached us, and they touched us in deeply personal ways, and they helped us all. In my case, and with specific reference to Anne Bannon, they saved my life." Catherine's voice cracked with emotion in a way that silenced the room for several moments. Then a woman of about 65 stood and asked to speak. She told of once feeling hopeless, trapped not just in an unhappy marriage, but in a life that wasn't the one she was meant to live. Then one day, nearly 30 years ago, she picked up a book, Curious Wine, and it showed her what was possible. She then thanked Catherine for saving her life. The four of us who were there with Catherine, Karen Callmaker, Amy Dawson-Robertson, Dylan Watson, and I, just sat there in awe. I can't speak for any of them, but I felt small in the presence of a writer who had made a mark like that on someone's very life. So what again of our trail? In a column on the general state of today's fiction, Salon's book critic Laura Miller asked, if the value of a voice lies primarily in the fact that it has previously gone unheard, then what's it worth after it's been talking for a while? Will someone in this room write our generation's Vigo Brinker or Curious Wine? Which of us might create serial characters as intricate and enduring as Kate Delafield, Jane Lawless, or Mickey Knight? Who's working on 2011's The Swashbuckler, the book that will paint such a vivid portrait of our time that people 25 years from now will say, yes, that's exactly how it was back then? And which of us will produce such a stunning pile of quality work that we become known as the queen of our genre? To look around. It could be the writer sitting next to you, or even the aspiring writer in the row behind you, or it could be you. Over the past year, I've had a lot of time to think about what I'd like to do next, not just in terms of which book to write, but where I want to go as a writer. I've come to the sad realization that one cannot simply decide to pen a classic. But one can decide, as Voltaire would say, not to let the perfect become the enemy of the good. I believe that while we can't choose to write great novels, we can and should choose to write good ones. We live in a time where anyone can call herself a published author, and for that matter, a publisher or an editor. It goes then without saying that such labels are no guarantee of quality. Even if we have the best of the best in our corner, it is still up to us as writers to be the gatekeepers of our collective body of work. I hope you'll indulge me while I drag you back to my metaphor, walking the trail, as if you have a choice. 10 years ago this month, I set out on what would be the trip of a lifetime, my personal quest to hike to the top of Africa's Mount Kilimanjaro. Like my character in Worth Every Step, I did a lot of research before deciding which route to take. Most trekkers choose the Marangu route. In fact, it's generally referred to as the tourist route. It's the shortest, most direct trail to the summit. It's relatively wide and straight, and it even has cushy bunkhouses at each of the overnight camps. Not surprisingly, Marangu is the route of choice for those looking for the quickest way to cross one of the world's highest peaks off their bucket list. However, it has a very low success rate to the top, because all of that speed and ease means your body has less time to acclimate to the altitude. In contrast, Kili's western routes take 2 to 3 days longer, and they're filled with hardship.